Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is David Abramowitz, the Chief Technologist at Trend Micro Federal. Now, David, before break, we're talking about how things have changed since the last two and a half years, both from a digital transformation perspective, but also from a security perspective. We talked about measuring and managing risks, mitigating risks. And one of the ways that the Biden administration and OMB are pushing is through this concept that we've talked a lot about zero trust. So let's start there. What are you seeing around the adoption of zero trust? How are agencies starting to use these capabilities to really understand their risks and manage and mitigate them?
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time for organizations to adopt a zero trust architecture. And I think we're going to see a lot of different steps and moves in different directions, depending on the agency. Of course, the critical thing we like to get across is zero trust is not a product. There is no zero trust solution, right? It is a strategy, an architecture, and there are bits of technology that contribute to that. So the biggest thing that we see our customers doing now, and the thing that we're trying to help them do, is begin that approach by starting a security posture review, figuring out what is the attack surface, where is the risk, what vulnerabilities exist in my environment that are sort of contributing negatively to my risk score, if you will. Where do my users and devices and applications stand, because those are critical in informing a zero trust policy. So assessing those needs is a really good way to start the journey.
When we talk about this idea of kind of this assessment, can you maybe give us just a little bit of what does that mean? Because I think don't I know as a CISO what my security posture looks like? Shouldn't I already know what's on my network, who's on my network? I mean, or is it, or what are some of the discussion points that maybe you are seeing or you're having about this posture review?
I think we've gotten to the case where there is so much sprawl, especially with the cloud and workloads that are running on the cloud, all kinds of different devices that are on the network, but maybe unmanaged or unprotected. You've got the network feed, you've got the email feed. It's almost too much for one human to handle. So I think you're seeing a lot of attempts at automation and orchestration. But at the basis, I think for as far as strategies for protecting this new digital infrastructure and making a journey to zero trust, we see pretty much four things. Number one is your base, your lowest layer, the security tool chain, the protection layer, if you will. Second is a desire for, we were talking a little bit about this before, a security abstraction layer. So a platform that can take feeds, whether they're from a vendor that has that platform or whether it's another vendor's product that's running in the environment but needs to contribute to that platform. So somewhere where we can collect all of the threat information and the metadata and make sense of it all, because a human can't get grips around that, right? So it's got to be, that security abstraction layer has got to take feeds from its own environment, third parties. No one vendor is going to provide a single solution to everything, especially zero trust. So at Trend Micro, for instance, we have a number of other vendors that provide third-party integration into our platform because we can't do it all, but we depend on those different technologies to give a more complete story about the users, the devices, the applications, the risk, the attack surface. So that's the second piece, is this security abstraction layer. And a CISO should be able to go there and see, okay, what is my risk score? How do I compare to other organizations? Where are my weaknesses that I need to shore up? Where do I need to focus my resources on now? Because this is playing with my head. The third thing is zero, and probably maybe the most elusive, but important, is a zero trust policy engine. So how do you start creating those policies that basically act on your behalf to make sure that this user at this particular time is healthy enough and not under attack and is using a device that is not compromised and doesn't have unpatched vulnerabilities on it to access an application that is free of any malware or is not distributing any malicious code. And so building all of that around, as well as what is my device posture, figuring that out. What are the things, the must-haves, the table stakes for a device on my network? It has to be, running some sort of anti-malware protection. It has to have a firewall. It has to have this. The base operating system has to be at least this level. So those are the table stakes to even start to put together in a rule for a policy, for a zero trust policy, to sort of figure out, is that user allowed to access this internal or cloud-based application on the internet at this time through this device? And that has to constantly be monitoring, happening in real time, because if that user's risk score, let's say, rises above a certain threshold, there might be another rule in that zero trust policy engine that kicks in and says, okay, hang on, your risk level just went up. It exceeded this threshold. Therefore, we're going to log you off of the internal systems. You're not allowed to access external applications until we remediate you. And boom, I'm going to take you offline. I'm going to isolate you right now, do that remediation, figure it out, and then we can get you back. So that's the third piece. And the final piece, the fourth piece, which is critical to any zero trust policy engine, is identity and access management. And that is not something that Trend Micro does natively. So again, we partner with or incorporate third-party applications for that, Active Directory, Okta, vendors like that bring that information to us so that we can have that user device information and use it for creating policies. So again, zero trust is not a thing to buy. It's a strategy, and the architectures that we're creating are going to have to prove themselves and report on a daily basis that they're performing as they should. They're going to need to be resilient and robust over time. And outside of that, in this risk-based world, we have to realize that getting our hands around that risk posture is probably the most important thing right now. It is not a technology problem. It is a risk problem currently, and that's what our customers are most concerned with.
I really appreciate the way you broke that down. It makes things easy to kind of understand about, okay, how to kind of create those assessments. From your perspective or from your experience, do a lot of the agencies already know kind of what that base layer is, or they're even starting not from zero, because no one ever starts at zero, but they're not necessarily much above zero. Like they really have so
starting
many
from
tools.
Zero to get to zero trust, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that to varying degrees, we're starting to see the beginnings of getting their arms around the environment, because there aren't a lot of policies in place right now that go to that level, that really police a user at a specific time and a device at a specific time. Usually, or typically what happens now is if I were to log in to a system, I would have access internally to all the applications, and there's no reassessment, right? Nobody is necessarily thinking about that, but that's a critical piece. Every time I jump to a new application, or every time I try to access a different piece of data, I need to be re-authenticated. And so things like that are starting to get into the thinking and strategizing of our customers. So I think they're making small steps now, and they've got typically so much security software and solutions inside the environment that are not necessarily talking to each other, and that makes things more difficult too. So I know there are some initiatives right now to do things like standardize on what a piece of threat intelligence log information looks like, so it can start to be shared among different vendors' devices. And so that will continue. And again, I think it's just going to be a bit of a slow crawl. But as organizations get their arms around their own risk and figure out what is it that I want to do, then they're going to take the next step. Okay, how do I now start to construct a zero trust policy around this and continue that down the line?
You mentioned this is a lot of it about understanding risk and where the risk lies and how to manage and mitigate risks. And I think the other side of the coin, if you will, is also the people side, the education and awareness side, because a lot of what Zero Trust is about is not trusting anyone. So if I do click on that link by mistake or on purpose because I didn't know better, it's not going to infect the entire network or the entire agency. What are you seeing around that effort too? Are agencies also doubling down on that awareness education piece?
There is a big push for that. And I've done a number of seminars to that effect, or exercises with different customers and organizations to further that education. I mean, look, we don't, when our kid turns 16, we don't hand them keys to a car and say, okay, you're 16, you can drive now, go ahead. Right? They have to take lessons. They have to take a driving test, written test. They have to study and understand all of the different things that happen in the traffic world. But we don't seem to do that as well for internet access. I think you will agree that we see all around us kids that are very, very young and aren't even talking yet. The pacifier for them is an iPad or a phone, right? And so technology is thrust upon people, young and older, right? And the education piece to that is sort of missing. We're not giving the lessons. We're not necessarily giving the guidance. And so when employees in an organization see something that's very well crafted and it looks like it's about something they're interested in, and there's a link, sometimes you're focused on somewhere else, or you just don't have the education, they'll just go and click. So what we've done at Trend Micro to help that, because we want everyone to learn at an early age to be what we call, let's say, a good digital citizen, right? Because we're all digital citizens working, interfacing with the federal government on all kinds of different systems. So starting that at a younger age and infusing that in and giving those lessons, I think will work very well later on. So we have an Internet Safety for Kids and Families program where we give that education to not only kids from probably fourth grade on up, but also to adults at PTA meetings, because as you know, as adults, we just love to do things like post where we went on vacation on Facebook, and here's all the pictures, and we're on this vacation now. And if I'm someone that wants to take something from your house, now I know you're not home, right? So it is all about getting that education out. And I think that's part of one of the things I really love about Trend Micro is that giving back to the community, and that Internet Safety for Kids and Families is a way that we're going to start that education and keep it going all the way through, so that when the people are working in a company, they understand much better the risks. They think before they click, they look for certain cues, and they understand how to be a good digital citizen. And I think that will really help the cause.
In many ways, it's just those little things. Oh, I should question that link before I click it versus, my company just sent me a raise. Okay.
Rolling your mouse over the address, the email address that's purportedly from a company or someone else, and just seeing that it's not. These are things that people sometimes don't even realize.
Right. It's simple. But David, unfortunately, we're out of time for today, but I very much enjoyed our conversation. So let me thank my guest. David Abramowitz is the Chief Technologist at Trend Micro Federal. David, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Jason, my pleasure. Thanks a bunch for having me on.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion, Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.